Buenos dias und herzlich willkommen bei Gate 7, deinem Podcast über Fernweh und Fotografie. In dieser Show geht es um Menschen, für die Reisen mehr ist als Spaß und Erholung. Freue dich auf praktische Tipps und Tricks, wie du tief in fremde Kulturen eintauchst und lerne, deine Abenteuer in bewegenden Bildern festzuhalten, egal mit welcher Kamera. Bist du bereit? Dann los, lass uns abheben mit deinem Gastgeber, Kai Beermann.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Gate 7 podcast. As you can hear from these first few words, this is the first episode in English of this podcast. I already announced that in the future, I'd invite English-speaking guests to be on the show. And, today is the first time, and I'm very happy to have a very special guest for this premiere. Her name is Valérie Jardin. She's a French street photographer now living in Minneapolis. She has a very popular podcast, which is called Hit the Streets with Valérie Jardin. And to give you a little bit of background, I discovered Valérie's podcast a couple of years ago while she was still doing her show on the This Week in Photo network, which was then called Street Focus. And, I've ever since then listened to every episode, and she's been a huge source of inspiration to me. So I'm very glad that she accepted my invitation to be the first English-speaking guest on this podcast. And what I really like about Valérie is that she's not a very gear-focused person. And she believes in the creative vision behind the lens. That's also the title of her newest book, which is called Street Photography, Creative Vision Behind the Lens. We talk about that book. And she is so kind to give very actionable advice how you can develop your own visual language, how you can improve your street photography and become a better photographer by, being a more discerning observer of everyday life. On her website, Valérie says, "Photography changed my life. The day I picked up a camera, I became a storyteller. I learned to see the extraordinary in everyday life, and my passion for documenting humankind has led me to find beauty in the most unlikely of places. As a visual storyteller, photographic images are how I tell these stories. Chasing light is my desire, my obsession, and my addiction." So you can look forward to a very passionate talk about photography with street photographer Valérie Jardin. And without further ado, let's just dive right into this new episode, the first episode in English of the Gate 7 podcast. Bonjour Valérie, welcome to the show.
Bonjour Kai, thank you for having me.
Valérie, I'm extremely happy to be talking to you because ever since I discovered your podcast, Hit the Streets, or actually it was your previous show on the This Week in Photo network, which is called
Street Focus, yeah.
Right, exactly. Ever since then, I've been a huge fan, and you've been a source of inspiration to me. And I just love the work you put out there. And in your voice, you always hear the passion for photography. So it's great to connect.
Thank you. Yeah, that's one thing. I'm definitely passion driven.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the best way. I mean, if you speak with your heart, and you do what you love, I mean, you can't go wrong. Just be yourself.
Exactly. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a very busy person traveling a lot, and even more bearing in mind that my show has been only in German so far. So you didn't even have the chance to listen to any of the previous episodes to know what you signed up for. So nonetheless, right. You didn't hesitate a minute to accept my invitation.
No, it's always fun, and I do as much as I can. I mean, I don't accept every invitation, for interviews and things, but I really try because, I'm on the other end too. I ask people to be on my show, so I always appreciate when they say yes.
Yeah. Valérie, those out there with a passion for street photography and podcasts, they probably have come across your name at some point. But for all the listeners out there who are not familiar with your work, could you please introduce yourself briefly? Who's Valérie Jardin and what drives you?
Well, I'm from France, but I actually now live in the US, in Minneapolis, in the Midwest. And I didn't pick up photography like many say, when they were 10 years old. For me, it was kind of a late thing. I was in my 20s already when I actually picked up a real camera and looked at it as something serious. Of course I had cameras growing up, but it was never really a passion of mine.
Yeah.
And so I became, quickly after picking up a big girl camera, let's put it this way, a real camera at the time. It was film and it was an SLR. I started a business and I started doing portraits. It was at the time when the only types of portraits people had, at least in the States, and Americans do a lot of portrait sessions. They have the newborn sessions and then the 3-month and then the 6-month and the 9-month. I mean, Americans are kind of crazy about having pictures of, professionally done pictures in studio and so forth of their kids. And then it's much bigger business here than it is in Europe.
Right.
I know for sure. So I started, taking pictures of my kids, my friends' kids. And then all of a sudden, because I was doing it a different way, I was doing it more natural, kind of photojournalistic approach, which was new because at the time, 20 years ago, all that people had for portraits were either the cheesy school portraits or the studio portraits with the fake backdrop and the kids sitting on a big crayon or a fake Christmas log, in front of a fake fireplace. Those were kind of the portraits of the time. People never had a photographer, or very rarely had a photographer meet them at the park or come to their homes to do portraits. And that's how I approached it, because I thought, well, if it was for me, that's how I would do it. So I started doing that. So from the moment I picked up a camera to opening my business, it was actually just a few months. And it just kicked off from there. I went from shooting portraits for a few years. I even shot 3 weddings, to kind of phasing out the portrait part of the business and becoming, really getting into commercial photography, shooting a lot of, interiors. I even did a lot of food photography, but the thing that I loved the most of my commercial photography time was shooting commercial and residential interiors for architects and designers. That was so much fun because it was really storytelling of a beautiful space. And throughout all that, I always traveled quite a bit, and I always, I always worked on personal projects, because I think when you turn your passion or your hobby into a profession, you kind of lose you can very quickly lose the passion because it becomes another job. And so, for a while, I didn't even want to bring my camera out on weekends, because I sure didn't want to I didn't want to take more pictures. And then when I switched to digital, I didn't want to have to process more pictures of my own besides the clients and so forth. So, for a while there, I was kind of losing the passion, and I realized that I had to start working on personal project. I had to start showing my personal work in order to kind of reignite, the passion. And, the one thing, although I pretty much see the world through my camera, because I photograph everything. I love architectural details, abstract, still life. The one thing that was always a constant was what you call street photography. And so I was starting to show more and more of my work as I was working commercially as a photographer. And then about 8-9 years ago, people started asking me, it's like, well, why don't you teach? Why don't you do workshops? Why don't you do workshops in France? And I thought, oh yeah, maybe. And then I did. One day I said, this is what I'm going to do. Yeah. And I did, I didn't start with a 1 day or a weekend. I started with a week-long, all-inclusive workshop in Paris.
Whoa, that's ambitious.
Yeah, that was ambitious, hotels and everything. I mean, I took care of everything. And it was very successful. And I went from teaching 1 that first year to having 9 total the following year. That were not only week-long, I had also some weekends in the US as well. And then at the end of that year, I quit my commercial photography completely and decided to just live the dream and travel for my passion, my photography, and meet people. And then that was it. I never shot for a client again.
That sounds awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Valerie, what I really like about your approach to photography is that from what I've learned listening to your podcast, you are not a very gear focused person. And that really, I think the same way. And so this is, I'd like to speak about that topic in this interview, to focus really on how you develop a visual language and how you become a strong visual storyteller, which also ties in beautifully with your new book, which has just come out. It's called Street Photography: Creative Vision Behind the Lens.
Yeah, I'm not a techie, so that's probably why I never talk about gear very much, because it's really, to me, as our friend, now I can't, David Duchemin says, gear is good, vision is better, and I love that phrase because that really sums it up.
Yeah, I totally agree. But before we get to your book, I'd like to ask you a very simple question. What was the last image you took, the last picture?
Was actually, was it yesterday? No, it was Sunday. So we're recording this on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
It was Sunday, and I was downtown Minneapolis, and I just... it was actually not street. Well, yes, it was, because I was doing, I love the winter light, and I was shooting into the sun, and people crossing a bridge in black and white, and I had a sunburst, and I was waiting for the right silhouette to go through. So that's the last picture I shot, and so that was about 24 hours, a little more than that. Unfortunately, I didn't take my camera out yesterday, which is rare, but as I'm preparing for another workshop and getting a lot of office work done, I don't always get out every day, but I try.
Yeah. Okay. Great. You mentioned that you started out in commercial photography and then turned to street photography. What is it exactly about street photography that particularly fascinates you and that made you build a whole career around that genre?
Well, I think it's the challenge of it, and the fact that no two photographers will ever capture the same photograph. To me, that has an appeal. There's nothing wrong with, 10 photographers lined up with tripods, in front of a landscape, waiting for the sunrise or sunset or blue hour, whatever. That's fine. That's beautiful. And I appreciate it as much as everyone else. It's just not something that I don't like the fact that somebody else will potentially have the same picture as me. Yeah. I like the unique aspect of street photography and the ultimate challenge that you only have the fraction of a second to freeze a moment in time that has never happened and will never happen again. And no one, even yourself, will ever be able to replicate. And that, to me, is the challenge and the appeal, I think. And granted, storytellers among landscape photographers, for example, will definitely all have a different way of seeing the same thing, but still, still going to be very similar from one photographer to another if they use the same gear and the same focal length, for example. So that, to me, that bores me. As much as I love and I appreciate the natural world, I don't need to photograph it. I'm just happy, looking at it. But street photography, the challenge of capturing that moment, and working fast, and that is so appealing to me. It's you can't get bored of doing that, I don't think, because you can always raise the bar.
Yeah, exactly. It always keeps you on the edge, and it's the constant excitement and out there on the streets and having to react quickly to situations as they unfold. That's really the beauty about it.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, street photography is a very broad genre in itself. It it has traits of portraiture. It's documentary photography is in there. So it's very difficult to put a label on it. What's your definition, or have you come up with a definition for it?
Yeah, I really don't think there are rules or absolute definition. You know, I think we kind of make the rules as we go. But to me, it's really capturing, it's seeing ordinary life in an extraordinary way, and it's really I do a lot of different. I do a lot of different approaches to this genre, depending on the way I feel and depending on my, the light I have that day or whatever. You know, I'll some days I just want to photograph silhouettes. Some days I want to get close. Some days I want to talk with people. So, I don't think there is any wrong or right way to do it. You just have to do it a way that fits you and that you feel good about. A lot of people will associate street photography with being in people's face. And yeah, that's one way to do it, but it may not fit you. And if you're mortified by the thought of, getting close and getting close to someone, then why do it? If it doesn't sound appealing to you. So I think you just have to find something that makes you happy, because ultimately you're doing this for you and you only, and do it in a way that speaks to you. And that's how you'll really develop your own style. It's not trying to fit in a certain mold. It's not because people, will, just, be, up close, or even, a lot of street photographers use flash now. That may not be you. I mean, I know it's not me. I don't like to provoke people because I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of this. So it's really finding a way that speaks to you, and then being respectful. Even if someone is using a flash, doesn't mean they're disrespectful. There are different ways to do it, for example. It's just not my way, but I'm not saying there is anything wrong with it. It can really give you some pretty, strong imagery. But I think it's important to find, not to try to fit in a certain style, just let the style find you, basically.
Yeah, that's very good advice, to listen to yourself, to see what kind of personality you are and express that through your photography.
Yeah. And there are ways, a lot of people are a little worried about photographing people that are recognizable. I'm actually writing a new ebook called The Unobtrusive Street Photographer, which is all about, how to approach this popular genre of photography while, keeping the I can't say that word in English, anonymity of people, and being a little bit more, that people are not recognizable. So, and still making strong photographs. So that's another way to do it. I think you really have to find a way that fits you and makes you happy. Because, if you're that nervous on the street, you're going to just send the wrong vibes and people are going to get nervous around you. So really have to find
there's no need to start out if you feel that insecure around people. You can start out photographing something where just with a human trace in it, and then go from there. And maybe after a couple of months or years, you find the courage to get even closer in a respectful way. And you don't have to.
Absolutely. I think you don't have to start with a wide angle lens either. I sure didn't. I was hiding behind a longer lens for a long time, until it felt I wasn't close enough. And I think that is kind of a natural progression. Yeah. I think eventually, every street photographer will end up shooting, with a 50 or 35, equivalent. And that's where they'll feel, they'll feel that's the right focal length, but it doesn't have to start that way. I think you get to that point. You don't have to start with a short lens right away.
Yeah. Well, by now you have lots of experience as a street photographer, and you've put that down in the book. before we get into that, Valerie, can you take us a little bit on your own journey as a photographer to become to get where you are right now? What were the milestones along the way that shaped your photographic style and your visual language?
Well, I've always followed, a lot of people say, who inspired you and so forth. Well, I don't know. I mean, I can't even tell you. I grew up with photographs by Cartier-Bresson and Doisneau on my bedroom walls, because when you grow up in France, that's usually, if you appreciate photography. And it was never something I wanted to do, but that's always, every year I would get the Robert Doisneau calendar, but I think everybody did, or everybody still does, growing up in France, you kind of grow up with that inspiration, no matter if you're into photography or not, that's part of living there. Those are iconic people, and we all know their work. So, I always loved that type of photography without ever thinking I would even start photographing strangers on the street myself. But, I never tried to fit in. I never tried to emulate somebody's work. I always followed my own thing. And it's funny because sometimes people say, oh, you're kind of, this reminds me of so-and-so, or you're, trying to emulate so-and-so's work. I said, oh, well, that may be, I never even thought of it, or I don't even know that photographer. It's just, I'm doing my own thing. And I think it's important because you need to, well, what makes a good photographer is consistency. I mean, we will all have lucky shots, because you have this award-winning photograph, it doesn't mean you're a good photographer. If it was a one-time thing, everybody can get a good shot at one point in a career. So it's really the consistency, and you can only be consistent if you follow your own vision and your own heart. And so if you try to fit in, it's not going to be consistent because it's not really you. I don't know if I'm making, if that even makes sense. It makes sense in my head. I don't know if I can really express it. So I do whatever I feel like doing. And that's probably why some days I'll be really close to people and I'll even do street portraits, which I don't do very often because I'm such an extrovert that it's so easy for me to approach strangers that I don't find it a challenge enough. Other days I'll do some silhouettes. Other days I'll really capture an expression. I'll get really close to someone without them noticing me and get that, that strong emotion. It's because I really follow whatever mood I am and on that particular day. I really do not set out with a goal in mind. It's whatever speaks to me. And it will, I'm a light seeker like every other photographer. So some days it's the light that will dictate where I'm going. I'm going to follow the light. Other days where the light is pretty dull, well, then I'm going to work on getting closer to people and capturing expression. So you kind of have to work with that too.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's there's no sure way to develop your own style. Some people, they prefer to look at the work of famous photographers or to lean more towards a mentor and take away some advice from them. And some others like you, they just set out there and follow their own whatever comes out of them and wants to find expression in a photograph.
Yeah, it's all about being discerning and not settling. I think that's the problem. That's usually what I see when I teach or when I do online critiques is, okay, what makes this, why did you even take that picture? You always have to put more intent. And I think maybe it's because of digital that we probably shoot a lot more than we should. And I think it's time, even in street photography, where, if you have a great shot in in a year, it's good. You can't have it. I always tell my students, if you have, after a weekend workshop, if you have 5 photographs that you want to print, your bar is not high enough, because you may have one great shot over the weekend. You'll have a lot of good ones, but the great shot where really things kind of came together, everything came together, that's so rare. And so if you have too many keepers, I feel that then you're too easy on yourself, and you don't have the bar high enough. So it's really putting more intent before you press the shutter. What do you want to say? Why are you positioning yourself this way? Why this subject? Why this gesture? Isn't there a stronger shot? Can you wait for something better? If you can't wait, should you settle for this subject? Is that the strongest subject you're going to get? So I don't shoot if I feel like it's not good enough. I don't think we should ever think, oh, it's good enough. And I don't feel like settling when you're on the street. Like, for example, you have the best backdrop ever.
Yeah.
And then you only have 30 minutes because you have to meet your significant other at the restaurant, or you go on a date, whatever. You only have so much time. Okay. Are you going to just grab a shot just because you only have that much time? Or are you just going to not settle and just rather not get the shot than get a mediocre shot? I think a lot of people will say, oh, I'm just going to grab a shot. Oh, that's good enough. That subject is strong enough. And then they have a shot that's like, it's not that great. And then they kind of ruin this amazing location by getting a shot that's not even that good. I think it's important to just wait. And I'll wait. I would rather not take a picture than take one that I'm not completely satisfied with. Granted, I'll take a lot of mediocre shots, but at least I tried. And I said, okay, I think this is going to be good. And that might just be the best possible case scenario. But I think we should always envision the best possible shot and not settle.
Yeah, I agree. To be clear about your intention and to approach it in that way, that's really helpful. And I also like what you said about expectations, that you shouldn't expect to come back home with lots of keepers if you go out on a day and shoot street. It's It's there are some of my colleagues who teach workshops who actually, I don't remember who does that, but some say, okay, for example, you come back with 100 pictures, just keep one, delete everything else. You really have to be, and I think that might be a little extreme. And I don't tell my students to do that, but it's a good, the idea behind it is actually quite valid. Out of 100 pictures, you probably only have one that's worth keeping, in street photography. And that could be a really good exercise to do, not to do on the trip of a lifetime, but, if you go out in your own city or limiting yourself, just really only press the shutter if you know this is going to be, this is the shot. It's a good learning exercise. And I think no matter what, limitations are good. That's how you're going to grow in the craft, for sure. Yeah, exactly. And it's yeah.
Because yes, you will have the lucky shot out of thousands of pictures, but the merit is not the same either. So, and granted, no one will know, but and that's really all that matters. To me, it's about how I feel about it. It's not how people feel about it. I don't care if people say, oh, well, it's such a great shot. And then inside I feel like, oh, well, yeah, I had to take 5,000 of just this one subject just to get this one. Well, then I won't feel good about it. It's just, then it becomes a lucky shot, and that's not good enough.
Yeah. And it's not always about the final result or about the image. It's all the whole process behind it.
Yes.
The experience out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm okay if I come back empty.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you've at least taken a walk.
Yes.
Get some fresh air.
Learn. Yeah.
Yeah.
And no matter what, you learn. As long as there is light, you learn. You don't even have to have a camera with you.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. That's good advice. I mean, even though you don't have a camera on you, sometimes you can always try to frame something and to look out for interesting things to photograph. And just the fact that you've spotted an interesting situation is really tells you that you're developing a vision for.
Yeah, absolutely. And my students hear me say that all the time. Sometimes they'll on a workshop say, "Oh, I just missed this shot." And I'm like, well, not really. You saw it, at least. And most people don't. So right there, they learned something. And so if you kind of approach it that way, it's like, oh, yeah, you're right. Actually, I saw it. So I saw that I missed it. So in a way, you missed freezing the moment with your camera, but you froze it in your mind, so you actually saw it, and it's successful in its own way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a lot of things that we've already talked about is in your book, Valerie, and let's talk a little bit about that right now. To begin with, how did you come up with the idea to write this book, and who is it for?
Well, I've wanted to write those visual stories for a long time, and because this was written for an educational publisher, it's actually going to be a college book as well. They wanted me to write a how-to, a more traditional part of teaching in the book. So I wrote part 1, which is the fundamentals of street photography, which, yes, it's a traditional way of teaching, and that's more standard approach. But, to me, the real learning happens in the photo walks, which is part 2. And that's really my whole thought process from seeing the shot to capturing it. And I go through about 100 photographs in different cities around the world, and you pretty much go on a photo walk with me as you're kind of in my head. And it's a very personal thing. It's a very personal approach. And I don't think it's been done very much before, and that's really what I wanted to give the readers. Now, in this book, they have both, so it's probably good. They have a traditional approach with exercises to, some assignments for each different approach of photography. And part 1 goes from different ways to approach the genre to elements that make a strong photograph, how to photograph silhouettes, and so forth, with exercises to practice. And then part 2, which is really the visual stories behind the photograph. So it's really for everyone. I mean, even non-photographers have purchased the book, and because they love photography, and they read it more as like a storybook. And it's for total beginners in photography or street photography will definitely find a lot in it, and but more advanced people also will. So it has a wide audience, I must say. And so far, it's been really well received. So.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading it. And as you said, the division between the two parts, the fundamentals in the beginning, and then the photo walks and all the storytelling that comes with it. It's a pleasure to read, and great fun.
Yeah. And it was kind of a gamble because I did not know how that would be received. And some people didn't get it at all. The one reader actually said, I really like the fundamentals, which is a more traditional approach to teaching. Yeah. But the photo walks were more like a diary. And so I was like, yeah, but everything that's in part 1 is actually in part 2, but hands-on and in the field, basically.
Exactly.
And so, but I don't think he got that. He thought that was kind of like a diary of my my day, my travels. So, it's okay. A lot of people actually skip part 1 because they they know me, they know my teaching, they read some ebooks before, and they went right into the photo stories, and I'm actually writing more stories. And so there'll be a second book with more photo walks coming for sure in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very actionable book, and lots of great advice in there. And well, whatever type of person you are, you might find more value in the first part, or if you're a more practical person, or you enjoy the storytelling in the second part, and you learn more from that, from the stories you tell, how you got the shots, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's the next best thing, I think, would be to actually be next to me and talking to me while I'm taking the picture, which is usually, then I feel like it was genuine, and it's written the way I speak. I mean, I'm definitely not a writer. I speak with I write like I do everything else, with my heart. And so it's really the thoughts that came through my mind when I saw from the mood to, everything that came into play when I photograph. And they're not my best work. I didn't, when I approached the book, at first I thought, I'll just go maybe 5 years and grab some of my favorite shots, and then I will write the story. And then I realized that that's not how it worked. I actually, except for a few shots that were from the year before, or maybe up to 2 years earlier, that I felt were strong photographs that would be great teaching examples. And I wrote the stories for those because, I mean, that's so vivid in my mind. I have such a photographic memory. Anyways, I remember the feeling, I remember the smells just by looking at a picture, even if it's years ago. But most of them were shot. I had 6 months to write the book. So I would say 70% of the pictures in the stories are shot within those 6 months. And I would shoot and I would write the story within a few hours. So, they're, of course, they're not all great shots, but I think they all shots that you can learn from. So they work, and to demonstrate the concept behind it. Yeah, that's why there are some from different cities around the world, and some colors, some black and white, and I explain why, and because I make that decision usually before I take the shot. So yeah, I think I think it's, I don't know, I haven't read it since I wrote it, but I think it can be quite entertaining at times.
Yeah, I found it very entertaining. And Valerie, if you don't mind, maybe we can talk about 2 of the images in the book.
Sure.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have it. I have the ebook, and I'm looking at one picture now. It's titled "Alone." Maybe which one it is.
Yes. That brings me right back just from talking about it.
Maybe and for all the listeners, we can maybe put it in the show notes, so
sure. Yeah.
Everybody can have a look at what we're talking about. So, what's the story behind that picture? And maybe first we describe what it's to be seen there.
Yeah, so this one is this was in Paris, and it's at the tip of Île Saint-Louis, which is the island that's behind Notre Dame. And Notre Dame is Île de la Cité, and Île Saint-Louis is the one that's connected to it, but behind it. And actually, I much prefer that one. Yeah. Notre Dame, Île de la Cité has so many tourists that I tend to avoid that. And Île Saint-Louis is kind of like a village on its own. I really, really love it. And especially off season. And I had just landed from my flight from Minneapolis to Paris that morning, and I always go back to certain places to kind of get back in the mood. I mean, I'm in Paris, and I usually go to the same coffee shop and kind of have that routine. And that day I was just feeling a bit homesick and lonely, and And you're in Paris and there are lovers at every street corner and people on park benches. And for some reason that day, I was just not drawn to those people. I was feeling a bit lonely and I was drawn to capturing that around me. And I saw this woman just below sitting on a bench alone. And I was so connected to her for some reason because it really portrayed how I was feeling. And so I photographed her. And there is definitely a triangle in that photograph because you connect, and triangles are a very strong compositional form. You really want to connect the dots. So you have the woman sitting on the bench alone.
Yeah.
And then the lamppost and then the tree, and you kind of connect those dots. And yes, I wrote this. I mean, to this day, I feel, the feeling of loneliness fills my heart when I see this photograph because it brings me right back to how I was feeling when I saw it. And so in the book, I will explain, when it was. I had just landed in Paris and didn't sleep on the plane. I was exhausted, and I usually just I land at 7:30 a.m. and I go strong all day. I walk the streets. I'll do, and that's usually the day before the workshop starts. So I'll do, a good 10 to 15 kilometers that first day just to keep going and shoot until I'm so exhausted and that I can finally have a good night's sleep. And so, and that day, yes, I was supposed to meet a friend who couldn't come, and I had not been sleeping for about 48 hours. So this is the way I saw Paris. And so then I explained, how I approached it, why I framed it the way I did, talk about the triangle. And then, so that's the story. Yeah.
That's a beautiful example. And it, explains so much about photography. Like, as you said, the feeling you had that day of loneliness. And then you saw this situation of the woman sitting there alone on the bench, and the whole composition of the picture, reflects that loneliness. She's looking towards the water, and there's no other person in that picture, and this very minimalistic composition. It all adds to the intention of expressing a sense of loneliness.
Yeah. So that's actually it was the first shot I took that day after I landed. So
a great one, yeah.
Thank you.
I like it. And also what you said, what photography does, that looking at that picture, it takes you right back into that situation. So that's a very, very beautiful, powerful thing that photography has, and you only get that from intentional photographs that you connect a story with. Then they have this.
Yeah, it's so true. And even the smells, I see pictures of New York, for example. It brings me right back to New York. And New York and Paris are my two favorite cities to photograph, and that they're so different.
Yeah.
And, but they bring different emotions and feelings. Yeah. It's very powerful.
Yeah. And maybe another one, second one, it's called Inspector Clouseau.
Yes.
I love that also because I like the character Inspector Clouseau. So.
Yes. And that actually, that was also in Paris. And I was actually with a group of students who were just done that day. It was, we had walked and walked and walked. And this was not far, this was in Le Marais, not far from, let's see. I can't think of the name right now. See, I'm totally blanking out some of the name, but we had just finished our long day. I mean, hours on the streets. And as we were going back, we saw this gentleman, seriously, I mean, coming out of a movie, basically, just with a trench coat, holding the newspaper, the hat, the glasses, totally like Inspector Clouseau. And I was, you know how it is when you walk, we were just going back towards the hotel. And, so the photo walk is officially done, but a lot of us decide to walk all the way back, and then of course we shoot along the way. And I was with just a few students, and then I saw this man, and I just shouted, I was like, "Look across the street!" And then so I had told them, whenever you see a situation like this, do not hesitate to run ahead of them. And it doesn't matter if you're going the opposite direction. Somebody like that is well worth, trying to catch the moment.
Sure.
Even if you have to run back where you're coming from or try to get ahead. So it was all about finding the best possible spot to capture this gentleman. And so I ran with a couple of students, I think, and we ahead of him, because he was going at a really fast pace, and ran ahead of him to a spot where there was really deep shadows going into bright sunlight and a plain wall.
Mm.
And then we had this moment where we could catch him coming from the shadow into the light. So we had this silhouette. And I know one of my students got a similar shot, but at a different time. So I think maybe it was more in the light than mine is more of a silhouette. So we did catch the same moment. We caught the same subject, but a different way. And it's not ideal. Usually when, even on workshops, my students don't shoot as a group. When we get to a spot where we need to split up, we all spread around. That's usually when I do my one-on-one, and then we regroup, and then we go to another spot. But here it was actually, we were done for the day. And then the streets gave us that gift. So, the lesson here is to really try to not capture the moment like when you see it, because chances are there's going to be cars in the way, or there's going to be a busy store behind the subject. It's to think and envision the best possible shot, and just try to anticipate, okay, I'm just going to go run a block ahead. Hopefully he will still walk towards that direction. I mean, you can't control that. You can only control your vision and your gear. So whatever the subject is going to do, you have no control over. Best case scenario was going to come right through that light in front of this really plain backdrop, and it was going to be the best possible shot. Or he was going to turn or walk into a store and you'll never see him again. But it was well worth anticipating and hoping for the stronger shot, which we got. And versus grabbing the shot right at the moment when we see him walk by us, and then there are 3 cars and, a busy backdrop, which would have ruined the shot. And so, that's a lesson learned from this example.
Yeah, that's a good example for that. You mentioned anticipation and control. Anticipation is very important, and because due to the lack of control you have in street photography, are there some things that can help to improve your ability to anticipate situations, even though you are not in perfect control on the streets?
Yes, I think the more you do it, the more you will learn those subtleties, and you learn, you learn people's behavior. People are creatures of habits in a way. When somebody speaks with their hands, for example, especially in France or in Italy, I do myself, a lot, and you'll see a strong gesture, for example, and you want to capture that. Well, people will repeat things a lot. If they do it once, chances are they'll do it again. Or anticipate, you see somebody interesting going into a store. Well, obviously they're going to come out at one point or another. So if you have time, just wait. You're not going to necessarily follow them into a store. You probably won't get that great of a shot if you do, but just wait, hang out for a little bit, and then wait till they come out, and then you have time to actually position yourself in the best possible spot to remove as many distraction, get close. I think it's important to really, envision and shoot the strongest possible way. Not always think, I can crop this or I can crop that. No, I mean, try to get it right. You'll learn more, if nothing else. Even if you don't get the shot, try to position yourself in the best possible way to get the strongest shot possible. And then just wait. Yes, that person may come out the back door, or they may just stay there too long and you can't wait that long. But at least, you learn something. So, people repeat things. People do the same things over and over again. You have no idea how many people I photograph year after year in the same cafes, in the same neighborhoods. The cities are like villages in a way. I stay in the same neighborhood every year, and every year I see the same people doing the same things. So, they're just dressed differently and they get a little bit older every year, or they have a different dog, but, people tend to do the same thing. So it's interesting. And I think very much like the wildlife photographer that has to study the habits of birds and whatever they photograph. It's a lot like that on the streets with people.
Yeah, that's so true, that people are creatures of habit, and it's worthwhile just to observe people around you and then envision their next move. And and not only people, you can, on the streets, if you see a light situation or a beautiful scene, just position yourself, have some patience, wait for some interesting person to walk by. And that's just little things you can do to improve your anticipation and the probability of getting a good shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And really just get out more. I think, even if it's for a few minutes, or even if you don't always have your camera and you're not on a photo walk, learn to see. It can be actually quite dangerous, because, for example, just last month, I drove out of central Paris, to the coast, and, just the drive out of Paris, I was so distracted by people, seeing shots everywhere. It's like, oh, I can't do this again. I need to be the co-pilot, not the driver, because I just see things. I see light. I see gestures everywhere. It is actually very distracting, because that's, as a street photographer, that's what you do. You never miss a thing, and you learn. Yeah.
Sharpens your senses and around you. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. For many, photography has also, just a meaning beyond just documenting things. It's a means of self-discovery. It's maybe a therapeutic. Yeah. Yes. Tool, a very difficult word. Does it have any of these meanings for you?
Oh, absolutely. When I'm in the zone, I forget everything else, good or bad, so it is a therapy, for sure. If I have some bad news, or I'm worried about someone, or someone is sick, or whatever it is, I'll take my camera and get out. And for those hours that I'm on the streets, I will actually just tune out everything else. That's about the only time I can, because I'm more of a personality, of being a worrier. Or I'm a mom, and you just always have something to worry about. Anyways. And, so that's more my personality. People think I'm really zen, but that's just not me. But I can be when I'm with my camera. I'm totally worry free and in the zone, and nothing affects me. So that is I feel very lucky. And I think when we have that, there's so many people who don't have that outlet, that creative outlet, or whatever it is. It could be drawing, it could be anything else. That outlet that lets you, that is therapy. It's really, it's wonderful.
Yeah, that really resonates with me as well. I feel the same way about photography. I forget everything around me and just get in the zone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like on a normal day, when you go out with your camera, does it take you a while to get into the flow? And if so, what do you do to really get into the flow?
No, it all depends. I don't really have a routine. I usually just let the street surprise me, and some days it will, like that day in Paris, right? I just dropped off my stuff at the apartment and then hit the streets, and I got the picture of this woman, and I was quite happy. I could have taken just that one shot for the day. I would have been completely satisfied. Other days it's just, it takes a little bit longer. But it's a lot of things. It's definitely your mood, but it's also, where you are. If shooting in your own city, yeah, it can get a little repetitive, but the streets is different every time you're in it. People are going to do different things. There's going to be different people, different light. So then sometimes I'll just go out thinking, oh, I'm just going to, follow the light today and just photograph shafts of light, just to get out there. Sometimes you just need that little boost if you're in your own city, because you know where all the best spots are. So you can always, the light. But when you're in a new city, I think it's important actually to stay focused, and not too scattered. But I kind of like I don't ever go with, unless I'm on a workshop, but I don't like to have an itinerary. I like to get lost on purpose and let the city surprise me.
Yeah, that's a good. Have you ever experienced some sort of motif fatigue that you go out in your city, Minneapolis, where you live, and you feel that, there's nothing to take a photo of?
No, maybe that day I won't shoot. I won't do street photography. Maybe I'll just do architectural abstract, or I will photograph still life. I think it's okay, and I think if you're a good photographer, you should pretty much be able to shoot anything. Of course, there are things that you're more interested in than others, but you don't have to always do the same genre. But I find that in the street photography community, most street photographers only do street photography. But I think there's so many other things to do and shoot that you will learn from doing those things. And it's nice to kind of mix it up once in a while too. I mean, I photograph things around my house all the time, on the windowsill or something. If the light is good, I like to, it's all practice.
Yeah, so true. Valerie, there's so many criterias for that could make a good photo. It's very subjective. But for speaking for you, what makes a great street photo in your eyes?
Well, I think the subject will be, it depends on what you like to shoot. I'm more minimalist. So, having a lot of, finding an elegant subject or somebody with, even if it's a silhouette, for example, it's even more important, to have the separation and the right stepping and, sometimes it's all about the light, and then, the subject is not as, you don't have to be quite as discerning with the subject, but still, if I'm shooting backlit, for example, if I have somebody with a baseball cap, it's not going to be quite as interesting as a woman with long blonde hair, with rim light, walking into the sun. So It's really getting a lot of those compositional elements and strong, a strong subject, the right light, and combining all that. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have to compromise because you have the best subject, but the background is really bad. Well, then, it's still all about the story. And so you try to, then you have to make some compromises. But those rare times where everything comes together, you have the sunburst right where you want it, you have the right subject, and the light is just so, and it's not going to last because you know how it is. Light changes, just a few minutes, you lost that light or that shaft of light, and everything comes together. You have the best subject possible coming through the light, and maybe sometime they make an eye contact and you have an even stronger shot. So many things. But I think it's important to be discerning when you look at your work.
Yeah, right. Well, you teach workshops all over the world, and this is something I'd like to touch on a little bit towards the end of our interview now. What is your approach to teaching photography, and what can people expect who hit the streets with you? Not just listening to you, but actually.
Yeah, well, I'm hands-on. I'm always there. I'm always available. I go on all the photo walks. I shoot with my students. Because I know people teach workshops very differently. Some instructors just send their students on assignments and they don't go with them. I'm always there, and they can be with me as much as they want. They can do their own thing as much as they want. I'm very flexible, but it's very gentle approach. I mean, we do critiques, but I'm not one to say, oh, that sucks. Oh, that's not very good. That's not me, because there is always something. That, it's first of all, it's so subjective, and then when you look at somebody's work, there is always something good to build on, and just giving a thumbs up or some thumbs down to me is not constructive, and why even bother? So there is always something that you can learn, even if you learn from your mistakes, and usually from just the first critique, the student will just improve tremendously, because you point out a few things that it's not fixing the picture that they're showing you. It's making sure they don't make that mistake again, or they look at it differently, or they approach it differently. I mean, look, you consistently, your subject is off step, for example, or whatever. Those are things that they won't do again. For sure. They'll be more, and then it builds on and builds on. And I have students that have been on 7-8 workshops with me, and it's amazing to see the growth. But even from, even on a weekend workshop, to see the aha moment, of somebody you first meet on a Friday night, and you talk with them and you see where they're at. And then by Sunday afternoon, when we do the final presentation and group critique, see how much they've learned and how much they learned from the others. It's amazing. I love it. Every workshop, some of my students will show me pictures that I so wish I had shot myself. And that's the best thing in the world for a teacher.
Yeah, that's the best compliment. It's very rewarding as a
and it's actually interesting because like recently in New York, when I was trying to give everybody some one-on-one time, one of the students said, "I just want to follow you, but like far behind, but I want to follow you. So just do your thing. I'm just gonna watch you." And that's actually really interesting, That's why I think it's so important that the workshop instructor goes on the photo walks with the students, because that's what the students want to see. They want to see how you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult to shoot street photography in a big group if you stay together. But if you have the chance to see where the instructor goes and to follow his vision a little bit for a while, that can be very, very helpful.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I never expect anyone, they're a group of 10 people, and I never expect anyone to shoot in a group, No. Sometime, as you walk from point A to point B, you'll shoot along the way. But when we get to a location, then we say, okay, we all meet back here in an hour, go do your thing. And sometimes they'll go do by 2x2s because they're new at this. And sometimes it's a little easier to be with someone. And then that's my time to spend time one-on-one with everyone, throughout the day or throughout the week. And then we regroup, and then sometimes we need a little more time. It's always very flexible. Yeah. And then we go to another, rich environment where we're going to spread out again. And then they all do their own thing and then come back, and then we'll discuss it. Do we need more time? Do we move to the next spot? And so forth. So that's how the day goes. Yeah. And then we stop for coffee, but we never put the camera down. Every opportunity.
Always be ready.
That's right. Yeah.
There's lots of different places where you hold workshops. What are some of your favorite locations?
Oh, definitely Paris. And I think I'm going to actually be giving more workshops in Paris right now. I think I have 5 for 2018, some week long, some weekends. I'm going to be spending more time in France. So I will probably add some private sessions as well. A lot of people assume I live there. So they call me up. So, oh, do you do a half day session or on the streets, one-on-one, which is amazing for anyone who can do it because, one-on-one for 3 hours is, the equivalent of, a few days on a workshop, basically. Well, not quite because you learn a lot from the other participants, but it's quite intense and we can work on specific techniques that are tailored to their needs, nonstop for 3-4 hours. Otherwise, New York, I love New York and I go there. It's almost like every other trip is Paris, New York, Paris, New York. But, I teach in Rome again next year. I'm going to go back to Australia. And I'm not sure when yet. I'm hoping fall next year. I taught a workshop there 3 years ago. If it wasn't so far, I'd be there more often. It's such a painful trip. And then, San Francisco, Minneapolis. I add workshops here and there, even 1-day workshops. Like I'm going to teach in San Francisco on Friday. And then next week I teach in Dallas on Friday. And I also speak for Fujifilm USA. So sometime if they send me on a speaking assignment, then I'll leave a day early and I'll add a workshop. So those can happen kind of last minute, like a month in advance. Sometime I'll say, oh, I'll be in Dallas. So I'll just go a day early and teach a workshop because I have to be there anyways. And so those are fun because, and those are usually only in the US where it's just a 1 day or 2 days. Yeah.
Mm. You mentioned Fuji. Maybe we can sprinkle some gear talk at the end. So your favorite camera is a Fuji?
Yes, it's I've shot the Fuji X100 series since I ditched my Canon 5D Mark II quite a few years ago now, and never looked back. I mean, I had a wonderful DSLR with amazing lenses, but the day I got the X100 in my hands, that was it. It was the S. A year or two later, Fuji approached me and I became an official ex-photographer for Fujifilm USA.
Yeah.
And, but I don't, I don't do all I don't do reviews. I was a beta tester for the X100F, which made sense because that's my camera of choice. But otherwise I don't do, I don't do that part of the assignments that a lot of ex-photographers, do because I love my camera. I don't need anything else. So to me, if you keep switching gear, it's counterproductive to your creativity. So, so that the X100 is my favorite camera. I have a couple other Fujis, which are more backups than anything else because that's really all I need. And I'm totally happy with it. So,
know your camera well and don't get distracted.
That's right. Yeah. And whenever I speak for Fuji, I don't talk about the gear. I just talk about my passion for photography. And it's fun. It's, I meet a lot of new people that way and, I love it. It's fun. I don't have enough time to do that, but, it's always a fun time to meet like-minded people.
Yeah, and on your podcast, you've interviewed so many amazing photographers, and it's a great chance to get in contact with photographers from all over the world and learn also.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we do the podcast because it's very self-serving, isn't it? We actually do it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
No, that's the best part about it. I mean, we might have never talked to each other, but through the podcast, you get a chance to learn and talk about photography.
Yep, absolutely.
Beautiful. Well, Valérie, you've been very gracious with your time. I really appreciate it, and was fun talking about photography with you. Where can listeners find out more about you on the internet?
Well, simply go to valeriejardin.com, and that's VALERIEJARDIN. And then there they can find, my Facebook, Instagram, the podcast is on there, the books, other projects I'm working on. Lots of things. There is always something. But the podcast Hit the Streets with Valérie Jardin is actually every Thursday on iTunes. And I think releasing episode 63 this week. So.
Wow, going strong.
Yes, and I did over 100 with the previous podcast, and I never skipped a Thursday. So it's been about 3 years of Thursdays without skipping a week ever.
They're very consistent, and I can only recommend checking out your podcast. I look forward to every new episode, and everybody passionate about photography will like the show.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Valérie, and maybe or hopefully one day we meet in person and shoot some street.
And we'll hit the streets. Sounds good. Thank you, Kai.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, this was the first interview in English on the Gate 7 podcast. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with street photographer Valérie Jardin. If so, please head over to iTunes and leave me a short review. That helps to make the show more visible in the iTunes rankings. And of course, any kind of feedback is very helpful for me to know where to improve the show further along the way. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you tune in next time. Bye-bye.